Tashidala each and everyone. Welcome to the 18th episode of Tibetan Youth and Reading. So today we have Pema Dolma as our key speaker. Now welcome Pema Dolma. Pema Dolma Tashidala.
Tashidala Tadawala.
So in order to briefly understand about her life's journey, let me tell a brief account of her life. In 2010, as a youth community organizer, she has closely worked in Boston to create an awareness about the economic and environmental racial justice. And in 2014, she has spent 7 months teaching English at Tibetan Children's Village, Seliku. Now we can call it ITI. And her first role within the Tibetan freedom movement and struggle started in 2016 when she did a campaign in international in New York as a campaign director. And after that, she has co-founded SFT chapter in her own university, and she became and served as the first president. And she has also interned with the US Congressman Jim McGovern and Senator Elizabeth Warren as well. So now my first question goes like this. How you became closely connected with this book, and what does this book mean to you?
Hi, Tadawala and Samala Tashdale. Ani Tadawala ki di vlog nyama kachi pege ne ba mabu yakpushu shiyore doling denzo ani anzo di chige tarlung chigyo probation but zola Tadawala ki pege vlog denzo sirona tanda di pege yaketa la bemasi yakpuyore kukup yakpuyore. Ini anzo ki toling ding di konda di inge ne dogire kachini dinge samzo ne kongsacho ki galup nangyo tep kola di doling yakpuchik tuyala nga peke ne chitana tes kapu yungire samso chinyanzo di tiringe doling di inge ne dogire. So thanks everyone, and sorry about that. I know that Tadawala's Tibetan vlogs are really great. So today the book that I wanted to talk about for our book talk was An Open Heart by His Holiness. And for your first question, Tadawala, I came across this book just actually like a few months ago in person. Although I'd heard about the book and how it's a great book before. I was at the SFT office in New York, and I was just going through the bookshelf and tidying up the bookshelf a little bit, and I found this book, which has been at our office for, I'm not sure how long it's been there, but it looks like a copy that's been probably read by some other people as well. And I just thought, okay, this seems like a great way for me to read a little bit and understand a little bit more about our Tibetan Buddhist culture. And so I decided to read the book without many expectations. And from the first page, it was just like page after page. It was such a great read that it went by really quickly. And when Tadawala asked me about the book talk, it was the book I was in the progress of reading. And it seemed like a really great opportunity to talk about the book more with other Tibetan youth.
Yeah, so now my second question goes like this. How does this book came into existence? How His Holiness visualized to write this book that into a form of physical book? Now we can read and reflect and practice in our daily life. And what are its relevance to the Tibetans like us, Tibetans youngsters particularly, and to all the Tibetans, and particularly for the other nationalities across the globe as well?
Talk a little bit about how the book came into existence and where the ideas for the book came from. And so actually it's really interesting. It's kind of funny because the book and the introduction to the book by His Holiness is actually a direct transcript of a speech or a talk that His Holiness gave in New York City in 1999. And it's funny because actually when I was talking to my mom about this book, my mom is like a practicing Buddhist as well. And when I was talking to her about the book, I was telling her about how it's based on a teaching that was given at Central Park. The opening is actually a transcript of a teaching given at Central Park in New York City in 1999. And I was telling her about how moving and how enriching the book was. And she was laughing. And she said that actually when you were just 4 years old, you were at that teaching running around in Central Park. So I thought it was very interesting because in my lifetime, I've had the blessing to attend quite a few number of His Holiness's teachings from when I was as young as like 4 years old. But a lot of the times until I was older, I didn't really have the patience or the ability to sit in one place for, a couple hours and listen to His Holiness's teachings and wisdom. A lot of kids are just kind of running around. And so it was interesting for me because it was like a second opportunity. Like this was a teaching that I was granted once when I was really young. And at that time, I didn't have like the mental capacity to absorb all the teaching. But now since it's in book form, I had the opportunity to sit down and read each page and each word that His Holiness offered with more patience and more understanding. So that's kind of like how this book came into existence. It's based largely on a teaching that His Holiness gave on the 8 verses of training the mind. And so this book also really focuses on our individual minds. So it's not only for Buddhists, actually. So Sadala, you mentioned like what's the relevance for people of other nationalities or religions. And this book, especially the first half or 3/4, the first 75% of the book, largely focuses on our daily practice and how we live our lives on a daily basis and how we can train our minds to have a more compassionate and honestly a more happy mindset kind of in our day-to-day lives by training our minds. And so that's why I found the book really helpful because although it's very short, let me see, it's less than 200 pages long. So although it's a very, very short book, it actually, in my opinion, encompasses the basic teaching, the fundamental teachings of Buddhism and an introduction into meditation in a very concise and articulate way. So I really appreciated that about the book because it basically wrapped up just like so much wealth of knowledge from His Holiness about what is the basic foundation of Buddhism, why is Buddhism important, and how can we use Buddhism in meditation to change the way our mind works and to change like the way that we perceive things. And it wraps it up into under 200 pages. So it's like a really big task, but His Holiness did a very good job. And so it's a really wonderful book. Yeah.
Now, what are the key takeaways and the practices that we can learn from this book?
I recommend everyone should read the book, and there's a lot of really great details and instruction guidance from His Holiness. But for me, the biggest key takeaways that I think that the book gave me were some of the really detailed and well-written guidance on like guided meditation. And so like in the book, there's like a chapter called, let's see what it's called. It's chapter 2. It's called Meditation, a Beginning. And in this chapter, it kind of goes into what His Holiness advises as being a good starting point for meditation. And to give like a really short version of that, His Holiness was guiding about kind of, in my mind, the way I see it, like a 2-step process for learning how to do meditation really well. And something I found really interesting was His Holiness talking about the Tibetan translation for meditation, which is like gom gyabya. And so when in Tibetan, if I said like, oh, like that the monk is meditating, I was like, oh, kushadi gom gyabdisha. But I wouldn't like really analyze what does that mean. And His Holiness breaks it down and explains that in Tibetan, the word for meditation, if you were to directly translate it into English, it translates to familiarize or to like ruminate on a specific topic or issue. And so when I think about that, kind of shifted my perception of what it means to meditate. And His Holiness was actually saying that everybody in the entire world really meditates on a daily basis, or many times in one day even. Like, for example, His Holiness gives the example of like purchasing a new item. So in the book, His Holiness gives the example of purchasing a car, but that might not be relatable for everybody. So purchasing anything really, like if I wanted to go to the store and, purchase this pen, before I purchase the pen, I may think, okay, this pen, it writes really smoothly. It's very lightweight. It's a black color, which is good for the text I want to write. And I'll think about all the qualities of the pen, what is the cost, and I will consider all those factors about the pen before I make a decision about whether or not I want to purchase that pen. And His Holiness was saying that, based on the basis of like the direct meaning of meditation in Tibetan, like that can even be considered as, meditation on a certain object. And in the book, His Holiness calls this single object meditation. And His Holiness was saying how, although we meditate, so much in our lives by this definition, a lot of the times we're actually meditating towards away from Buddhism and towards more negative energy. Like maybe if you're walking down the street and you're trying to cross the road and a car comes and almost, blocks your road, then you're so angry. And for the next 10 minutes of your walk, maybe you're thinking like, that driver was such an idiot, and he or she doesn't understand traffic rules, is being unsafe. And we're like replaying, we're analyzing what the moment of what happened in our head over and over. And so that's meditating towards anger or towards like some negative emotions. And so His Holiness said like the daily meditation that most people are doing is actually, taking us further into a path that might have negative or hostile energy or emotions. And so we should try to focus on cultivating, because the positive mindset of meditation, using meditation as a way to guide us towards like the Buddhist path or to like a compassionate path, that's something that you need to do through focus and intention, and that it takes a lot more patience, but it has a lot of positive benefits, unlike the negative meditation, which happens naturally, but has a lot of negative impacts on our happiness and on our ability to be compassionate towards other people. And so that was kind of like the big umbrella like teaching that I really took away from the book, which I got to read it through His Holiness's words and through His Holiness's guidance. So that was like a very well written and like really easy to understand basis for why it's so important for us to do intentional meditation. And in the book, like I'll just share briefly, because people I think will hopefully can read the book for themselves. But in the book, one of the big sections, one of the big chapters that I found really influential was about the actual process of guided meditation, which would be like the first step is like single object meditation, I think it's called. Sorry, I'm not like a Buddhist teacher, so I'm just kind of sharing what I learned from the book of His Holiness. And I think that people will read the book for their own and learn from His Holiness directly. And also maybe if they have a Buddhist teacher, then they can also learn this from somebody who is also a more experienced Buddhist teacher. But for me, the one was the first one was like familiarity with a chosen object. So like you would choose a single object or a single person or idea or concept in your mind, and you would meditate on that. And so the meditation wouldn't be like emptying your mind or thinking about nothing, but rather it would be focusing all your thoughts on that one object and analyzing all of the positive attributes that you can think of in your mind for that object for as long as you can. And once other thoughts come to your mind, you would identify like, this thought is not related to that object, it's not related to the analysis. So it's not like creating a closed box where no thoughts are allowed to come in, and if you think about something else, you're failing. It's not, His Holiness guides that like if another thought comes, you should welcome it and then label it as being a distraction and then put it away for now. And then just focusing on that single object until just the thought of that object can bring a sense of happiness or compassion in your mind. So for example, if I were to choose, maybe I have a teacher who's really strict and who's always giving me a lot of homework and I'm always really frustrated at their class, then I would choose like familiarity with the single object meditation and choose them as my object. And I would just think, okay, maybe that professor, maybe she is very intelligent, maybe she's very independent, maybe her lectures are very interesting. So although she causes me like, some hostility or frustration in my homework time, I can think about all her positive qualities until just the thought of her will bring a positive emotion within me. And then it would go to like the next step, which is then just to hold that emotion that it creates, the positive emotion. So I can now stop thinking about the analytical, positive aspects of her, but rather just thinking about that feeling, the positive feeling that comes to my mind. And that positive feeling, His Holiness said, it's very natural for that positive feeling to go away very quickly in the beginning. So I think for maybe like for 15 minutes, I'm thinking about all the positive aspects, and then it brings the positive feeling. That positive feeling, it might go away in 5 minutes, or it might go away in 1 minute, or it might go away in 30 seconds. But as soon as that positive emotion, feeling, or in your mind goes away, then His Holiness says you go back to the analytical meditation to bring that positive feeling again. And you keep continuing that cycle again and again until you have the patience and the practice to be able to hold the positive emotion for a longer time. For me, I'm like a very detail-oriented and analytical thinker. So the way I learn, the way I've learned since I was young is through books, through textbooks, and through lectures and classrooms. And so for me, when I think of meditation, like giving a step-by-step process for like how to begin my practice of meditation in a more intentional way, for me, it was really helpful, because then I can sit down and say, now I have a specific task that I have to accomplish, which is like the single object meditation followed by the like positive feeling meditation. And so all of the thing that I just talked about has like a lot more detail in the book as well, about the process of how we do it and why His Holiness would recommend this way for like a beginner meditator. And I think like a lot of young Tibetans would understand like why Buddhism is important, because their parents have told them, or their family has embedded that sense, like instilled the sense of appreciation for Buddhism in their mind. But for me, for many years, like I felt a little bit like confused, because like I know I've been told since I was very young I'm a Buddhist, and this is our family culture and our Tibetan tradition. But I don't know if I had a personal connection with Buddhism or a personal understanding of like the Buddhist path as like guided by His Holiness. And so I think like using this sort of text, like an open heart by His Holiness, is a way for young people who might need a bit of a more like explained way of practicing Buddhism. And so this book really does provide a great combination of that, like a combination of deeper understanding of our inherent culture and religion, but also a new way of teaching that. Yeah.
So now I would like to ask you why we as the Tibetan youngsters should go deep down about reading about the Buddhism. Just for being a Tibetan, we being a Tibetan, we can say that we are aware of the Tibetan culture, religion, and so many aspects of life. But if we go deep down and check and cross-check, then we didn't know that much about our Tibetan culture, right? So when we analyze and scrutinize. So how do you think how do you think what is the relevance of studying Buddhism? Why we should study Buddhism, and how is it relevant to the for the Tibetan and to across the globe? Why we should study?
So I think I talked about it a little bit already, but just to go more deep into your question, Siddhartha, like I think that like many Tibetan young people, like including especially myself, I was born and raised in the US, and since I was really young, we always had a chogang, like an altar room at our house. When I was, I think like 11 or 12 for Sakadawa, my family, like my mom took my sister and I to do like 13 koras at Swayambhu. So we walked all night. I think at one point I was literally sleeping with my eyes closed, and my mom was just guiding me through the crowd of people. And so it's like we already are taught to appreciate Buddhism and to see it as part of our culture and our identity. And we're already, in many cases, we do those actions of Buddhism. But in my personal experience, I think some of the actions were done without maybe the full understanding of why it's so beneficial or why it's so important. And I think that's why it is, we are lucky that as Tibetans, we're born into families where even if we don't understand the intent of our actions, oftentimes we are taught to have actions that are, compassionate or that help us in our path to Buddhism and to a more compassionate existence. But, when I was about like 14 years old, I started doing community organizing in Boston. And I think Tadala, you mentioned in my introduction, I was like a youth community organizer. And I was working on like economic justice, racial justice, and environmental justice campaigns. And I remember like the first time I joined this, I did like a internship as a community organizer. I remember the first question they asked me was like, why are people poor? And I remember like, I was just thinking about why are people poor? And then I just had a lot of thoughts, but most of my thoughts I realized in retrospect were guided by my upbringing as a Buddhist. And then from there onwards, for the next 6 or 7 years, as I was engaged in like economic, racial, and environmental justice campaigns and activism work in Massachusetts, a lot of my basis for my work was all rooted in Buddhism. So I definitely understood that economic justice was important because it shows compassion to those that have less in society, and racial justice is important because it shows compassion towards those that are ostracized or oppressed by the political or social systems in place, and whatnot. But I didn't necessarily think like, okay, I'm an activist because I'm a Buddhist. I thought of it more so as like, oh, this is just how I see the world. Like I see that there's injustice, so that means that we should try to do something to change the system of injustice. But what I really liked about this book as well is in the introduction, like His Holiness talks about injustices as well and how it connects to Buddhism. So I'm just gonna read one line just directly from the book, where His Holiness says like about one of my elder brothers, who is no longer alive, would tell me of his experiences living in America. He lived a humble life, and he told me of the troubles, the fears, the killings, thefts, and rape that people endured. These are, I think, the result of economic inequality in society. It is only natural that difficulties arise if we must fight day by day in order to survive, while another human being equal to us is effortlessly living a luxurious life. This is an unhealthy situation. And His Holiness says that I therefore think that this huge gap between rich and poor is very unfortunate. And so for me, like reading from His Holiness directly, this book has a lot of, it has the teachings of like how to meditate or how to start one form of meditation at least. But it also includes a lot of little stories or little anecdotes from His Holiness's life, or examples like the one I gave about the purchasing an item, or this one about His Holiness's experience, speaking with his elder brother who lived in the US. And it shares His Holiness's views on a lot of small things. Like, so here it talks about socioeconomic inequality, like wealth inequality. And His Holiness was saying that he thinks that the wealth gap, especially the wealth gap in developed countries, it's so vast. Like the wealthiest people in the US are the wealthiest people in the entire world, whereas some of the poorest people in the US are still living in conditions that are quite difficult in many cases. So His Holiness is talking about how that sort of inequality is actually something that as Buddhists, we should care about, and we should try to, if we as Buddhists say that we want to alleviate the suffering of other people, in the book, His Holiness says that when people make a decision to do something good, like for example, if we know it's bad to steal. So if someone says, I'm not going to steal because it's illegal, or I'm not going to steal because people might think that I'm a bad person, then those are like, it's you're still not stealing, but the intention behind not stealing is motivated not by compassion. And so the motivation for not stealing, His Holiness said, should be that you don't want to cause suffering for other people. Like if you steal something from someone else, then you're causing them like suffering or unhappiness. And so by the same way, like if our goal in Buddhism is to reduce or alleviate suffering of others, then by that same value, then by not acting on these inequalities in society, these injustices, then we're actually allowing others to continue suffering when possibly we could have done something to help alleviate or change the system that was causing suffering for others. So I think that for myself and also for other Tibetans, it's really important to read these sort of analytical texts because it explains like the connection between our culture and our religion as Tibetan Buddhists. And it connects it with like the day-to-day problems we may face in our society, like our lived experience. For me, like a big gap in my understanding of Buddhism was, I was like, understanding one thing of Buddhism that was my parents and, our religious community, Gompas. And then there was like my existence here in the US as like a Tibetan American living in Boston. And I didn't always see how they connected. So the book was also a really good way for me to reaffirm the connection between Buddhism and in my day-to-day, my actual practice of my day-to-day life. Because we're not Tibetans, unfortunately, like a lot of us are not nomads anymore. We don't live in Tibet. We don't have the same lifestyle. So helping us understand how we can apply Buddhism to our new reality of life, so that Buddhism is still relevant in our lives, so that it's still something that helps guide the way that we live.
Thank you so much. So finally, what is your last words for the Tibetan youth when it comes to reading?
Yeah, sure. I think like all of my friends probably know by now. I've like told them they should read this book, but this is a really good book, and it's written by His Holiness, and so that's like the first reason why people should definitely read it, just to hear more about His Holiness's teachings and whatnot. But also, like, regardless of who the author is, the teachings themselves speak for themselves, I think. So even if I read this book and I didn't know His Holiness had written it, it still would have brought me a wealth of knowledge. So I think that the way that it's written, you really get a better sense of His Holiness and of Buddhism. I think His Holiness said that the goal is like by the end of the book, the reader should have a basic understanding of Buddhism as well as an introduction to meditation. And so for me, I felt like that was definitely achieved. And if many of you have probably already read the book, and if you've already read the book, then I would just recommend that you can reread the book. I've already read the book twice now. It's only been like a month or so, but reread the book again so that you can continue to strengthen your understanding of the practices. And then also to, the main goal of Buddhism is to spread compassion, not just to hold compassion to yourself, but to spread it. So if you've read the book and it was a while ago or something, I'd recommend, rereading it or skimming through it again, and to continue sharing the book with your other Tibetan peers, because a text like this is so valuable, and His Holiness has like given it to the world as like a gift. And so Tibetan youth should definitely accept the gift and try to deepen their understanding. And maybe, someone would read it and they wouldn't feel the same agreement as I do. Maybe they would challenge some of the things, but in the book, His Holiness even says that anybody who's trying to practice Buddhism should spend at least 12 years questioning and criticizing, not criticizing in a negative way, but calling into question all the teachings of their teachers. So if somebody, wants to read the book and they don't agree with everything, even that is a great exercise on how to how to deepen your skill to question things and whatnot. So regardless of what your personal view is, you should definitely read the book.
Yeah. So finally, we had a very effective and engaging discussion about this book called An Open Heart by His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama. And I myself had learned so many things from this book, particularly about the meditation, single-pointed meditation and 8 verses of mind training, which is, I think, is very much connected and very much helpful to the students also, because in our daily life, we have to study, right? If you practice these things, then it can easily help you in remembering those things quite for a long time, and you can benefit others in many ways. And I hope through this video, youngsters like me and all the viewers could get some beneficial insights and knowledge about the book Open Heart by His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama. And on behalf of all, I would like to sincerely thank Pema for coming to this episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tadawala.